My name is Megan, and 3 years ago I bought a country house that seemed perfect to me. It was located in a quiet area close to the stunning ski slopes. The location was simply excellent, because working remotely as an application developer, I could afford to live anywhere, and, frankly, noisy cities and constant communication with people never attracted me. I have always been a person who prefers privacy. Since childhood, I have been introverted, and while my older brother Dave shone at sports competitions, winning cups and popularity, and my younger sister Rachel made hundreds of friends, easily finding a common language with anyone, I preferred to delve into books and computer programs, feeling comfortable in the world of numbers and code. Dave married his high school sweetheart Lisa, and they had 2 children, the restless 1.5-year-old Tommy and the serious, sensible 6-year-old Emma, who already knew how to calm her younger brother with one stern look. Rachel didn't lag behind either. She married her college boyfriend Mark, and they had a charming 4-year-old daughter, Lily, who seemed to have inherited her mother's natural charm and ability to instantly become the soul of the company. My parents, even though they were already retired, continued to interfere in the lives of each of us with the same energy as in childhood, when their word was the law, and they decided everything for us, from choosing clubs to future careers. Therefore, when I inadvertently shared the news about buying a house with them, I immediately noticed a spark of an idea in their eyes, and a moment later my mother joyfully exclaimed, "A house near the ski slopes is perfect. You should have Christmas this year." She clapped her hands as if she had just solved a crucial problem. I fiddled with my coffee mug and hesitantly objected. "I don't know. The house isn't that big, and I'm not sure I'm ready for entertaining nonsense." My father intervened, waving me off as if I had said something completely ridiculous. "It will be useful for you to have company. You spend too much time alone with your computer." Dave nodded, smiling. "The kids will be thrilled. They dream of skiing so much. Come on, Meg, this is going to be fun." After several weeks of doubt and hesitation, I reluctantly agreed. After all, it's just one time, and it might even be nice to spend the holiday surrounded by family, instead of spending Christmas in silence, working on another project. As the holiday approached, I worked harder and harder, trying to finish all the projects before the start of the holidays. December is one of the busiest months for developers, because companies are rushing to release updates, and startups are eager to launch new applications, counting on the New Year's rush. The closer Christmas got, the more clearly I realized that I simply would not have time to prepare the grand dinner that my mother certainly expected to see on the table. The day before the family's arrival, after looking at my to-do list and realizing that between fixing bugs and setting up servers, I wouldn't even have time to slice a salad, I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the best restaurant in the area, Pine Valley. They offered a festive package: turkey, ham, side dishes, desserts, everything you need for a sumptuous feast. It cost me a small fortune, but I decided that being calm and stress-free was worth the money. When the family finally pulled up to my house, the sight was reminiscent of a scene from a movie. Cars stopped one after another, children poured out of them, who immediately began to chatter and rush around. Adults unloaded suitcases, gifts, ski equipment, bags with some endless amount of things. The noise was unimaginable. Mom, as soon as she crossed the threshold, immediately rushed to me with open arms. "Oh, Megan, this place is great. I can't believe you're living here all alone." I smiled tightly, already feeling the alarm of my introverted mind going off in my head. "Thanks, Mom. Let me show you the house." The tour took no more than 5 minutes. It was not a mansion, but a modest but cozy 3-room dwelling. I converted one of the bedrooms into a study, so most of the family had to huddle on air mattresses and pull out sofas. As soon as we returned to the kitchen, Mom immediately looked around and asked suspiciously, "Where's the Christmas dinner? You've already started cooking, right?" I shivered slightly, realizing that I was about to have a difficult conversation. "I ordered everything from Pine Valley. They'll bring the food tomorrow morning." In the silence that followed, Lily could be heard squealing joyfully in the hallway when she saw the snowflakes dancing outside the window. My mother's face fell so dramatically, as if I had just announced that I was canceling Christmas altogether, and not just ordered dinner at a restaurant. Food for the holiday, but not cooked with your own hands? This was clearly beyond her comprehension. Food in the restaurant? For Christmas? Her voice cracked, as if I'd told her something really terrible. Mom, I was overwhelmed with work. I didn't have time, I began, but she immediately interrupted me, pursing her lips. A good hostess will always find time, she snapped, folding her arms across her chest. When I hosted guests for Christmas, I started preparing a few days in advance. I bit my tongue, knowing it was pointless to argue with her. She never understood my career, always treated it with slight disdain, as if software development was not a real job, but just a hobby that had nothing to do with the real responsibilities of an adult. But I've long been used to the fact that for her, work is considered serious only when it involves physical labor or at least the need to go to the office every day. Thankfully, despite my mother's disapproval, Christmas dinner went better than I expected. The food from the restaurant turned out to be delicious, and no one except Mom expressed the slightest dissatisfaction. On the contrary, everyone ate with pleasure, praising the dishes. After dinner, we exchanged gifts, and that was the only moment when I really felt that the party was a success. I spent weeks trying to find the perfect gift for everyone. I gave Dave the latest game console he'd wanted for a long time, Lisa the designer handbag she'd dreamed of but hesitated to buy, Rachel and Mark beautiful framed family portraits, toys for children, and organized a weekend trip for their parents. A cozy country hotel with a lake view. In return, I received a scarf from Rachel, socks from Dave and Lisa, and a coffee mug from my parents with the inscription, "The best aunt in the world." We all contributed together, Mom explained when she noticed that I was somewhat puzzled. We thought it would be more meaningful. I smiled and thanked them, even though I was well aware that the total cost of all their gifts was less than what I spent on one of them. But I reminded myself that Christmas wasn't about material things, and I tried not to dwell on it. The days after the holiday turned into a constant fuss and chaos. The children used my house as a playground, running up and down the stairs, spilling juice on the carpets and scattering toys everywhere. The adults went skiing, and in the evenings they returned home, waiting for another delicious dinner, for which, of course, I paid again. No one ever offered to help clean up the dishes that were piling up in the sink. No one noticed the wet towels thrown on the bathroom floor, and it didn't seem to occur to anyone that someone should keep the house in order. Every night, when everyone finally fell asleep, would quietly clean up, just so I wouldn't go crazy from the mess. One morning, when I was trying to carve out at least an hour for work, Dave poked his head into my room. "Megan, we're out of coffee," he complained, as if it were a disaster on a global scale. I didn't even take my eyes off the screen. "There's a grocery store 10 minutes away," I replied, continuing to type intently. "Well, we don't know the area," he countered, as if that explained why he couldn't go get coffee himself. "And everyone is going skiing." I finally looked at him. He was standing in the doorway in his new ski pants, the ones I'd given him for Christmas. "I'll go get some coffee when I finish this section," I said as calmly as I could, even though I was starting to boil inside. "We wanted to have coffee before we went," he insisted. I closed my laptop, unable to contain my irritation, threw on my jacket and went out into the cold morning air while everyone else continued to prepare for their day of fun. By that time, I was exhausted, lagging behind work, and, frankly, my bank account had already begun to suffer from daily expenses for restaurant lunches and dinners for 9 people. But what struck me most was that on New Year's Eve, when we raised glasses of champagne, my mother said with a satisfied smile, "It was so wonderful. We should do this every year." I almost choked on the champagne. The next morning, when everyone finally started getting ready to leave, I watched with some relief as the suitcases, bags, and ski equipment were loaded into the cars. "Thank you for everything, Megan," Rachel said, hugging me, It was an amazing Christmas. Yes, Dave nodded, patting me on the shoulder. We all had a lot of fun. Thank you, dear, Mom said, kissing me on the cheek. Everything was just fine. And one by one they drove away, leaving me alone with the house, which now looked like a tornado had swept through it. The year passed quickly, and, immersed in my work, I did not notice how the seasons changed, as winter began to assert itself again with cold gusts of wind making their way through the cracks of the windows, and light, barely noticeable snowflakes whirling in the air, like a leisurely dance. My life was measured, filled with endless tasks, deadlines, and nights on my laptop, and I was grateful for the peace and quiet of my home, for the opportunity to work without distracting noise, for solitude, which never seemed like a burden to me, but rather, on the contrary, was a precious refuge. Mom and Dad rarely called, mostly on holidays or on my birthday, always warmly but briefly, and they never mentioned Christmas all year. I almost began to hope that maybe they had forgotten about last year's chaos, that they would not want to repeat this tradition, and that this year I would have a chance to spend the holiday in silence, with a cup of hot cocoa and my favorite book, wrapped in a warm blanket by the fireplace. But that hope was shattered exactly 2 weeks before Christmas when my phone rang and I looked at the screen and saw my mom's name. Darling. Her voice was surprisingly cheerful, even too cheerful. We will all come to you for Christmas. A tight knot tightened in my stomach. What? I asked, hoping I'd misheard. We're coming. It was so wonderful last year, we thought why not do it again? Before I could protest, she had already said goodbye and hung up the phone. I spent the next few days weighing my options. Could I somehow refuse, reschedule the dates, or at least convince them to choose another place for the holiday? But in the end, as always, I did what was expected of me. I started preparing. I cleared my schedule, deleting everything from it that could be rescheduled, filled the refrigerator with food, mentally tuned into the noise, chaos, and sleepless nights. What I wasn't prepared for was that just a week after that call, I'd get a text saying they'd already checked out and would be at my place for dinner. I almost spilled my coffee when I saw this text. With shaking hands, I immediately called my mom, trying to figure out if I had read the message correctly. "Oh, yes, dear," she said quite serenely. The children graduated from school earlier than expected, and everyone managed to get more free time at work. Isn't that wonderful? But I thought you were coming on the 23rd. I exclaimed, trying in vain to explain that the change of plans is not a pleasant surprise, but a disaster that ruins my work schedule. Mom just laughed. Well, now we'll have more time to spend together. 7 hours later, my driveway was filled with cars again, and my house was filled with noise and bustle. Mom rushed in first, hugged me, but immediately pulled away after a cursory glance around the living room. "Megan." "What is it?" she exclaimed in horror. "Have you decorated the house yet?" I took a deep breath, trying not to get annoyed. "I was going to do it over the weekend," I explained. "I wasn't expecting you until next week." Mom just waved me off, clearly not impressed by my arguments. It's good that we came early to help. The help, of course, came down to my mom sitting on the couch, pointing me where to hang the garlands, while the children had already settled in, scattering their toys on the freshly vacuumed floor. Just half an hour later, Mom sighed again and, after examining the refrigerator, announced, "There's nothing to eat in the house." "I wasn't expecting you until next week," I reminded him, trying to stay calm. "I can cook something in an hour." But, of course, it didn't suit her. "No, no," she shook her head. "Let's order something like last year." I silently handed her my credit card, knowing that I would probably regret this decision. "Only the essentials, Mom," I added. "I've already spent a lot this week." She just patted my cheek like I was 12 again. "Don't worry about money during the holidays, dear," she said. "Family is the most important thing." 2 hours later, She returned with bags of ready meals from the gourmet department at an expensive grocery store, 3 bottles of wine, and a receipt that made me wince. "Mom, this is much more than we need," I exclaimed, looking at the endless stream of food she was putting on the kitchen table. "When I'm on vacation, I like to enjoy myself," she replied nonchalantly. "Besides, I can never relax at home. There is always so much cooking and cleaning." I clenched my jaw, trying not to say something I'd regret later. Christmas hadn't even arrived yet, but I already felt that this year everything would happen again, down to the last detail. Christmas morning came, and anticipating the inevitable chaos in the kitchen, I did not experiment and ordered a full festive lunch at the Pine Valley restaurant again. This year it cost me even more than last year, but I knew that trying to cook dinner on my own would only lead to stress, to my mother criticizing my culinary skills, and the guests would eventually be unhappy anyway. When the food arrived and I laid out the dishes on the festively set table, watching the children's eyes light up and the adults enthusiastically pounce on the treats, it seemed to me for a moment that maybe it was worth it. After dinner, when the plates had not yet been cleared away, but had already begun to accumulate in the sink, it was time to exchange gifts, a tradition that I have always treated with special trepidation. I spent weeks carefully choosing the perfect gifts for everyone. Dave, who had been dreaming of a drone for the past few months, got the latest model with a camera. Lisa got designer winter boots that she would not have bought herself. Rachel got a luxury spa package. Mark got expensive watches. And the children got exactly those toys, which they specifically asked me back in the fall. I have prepared something special for my parents, a weekend at a 5-star resort in the mountains, where they can relax and enjoy nature. When it was my turn to open the gift, they handed me a medium-sized box, and I curiously unwrapped the package. There was a coffee maker inside. Not expensive, not special, but the kind you can find in any department store at a discount. A forgotten price tag was partially visible at the bottom of the box. "We all chipped in," Rachel explained with a smile. "We know how much you love coffee." I forced a grateful smile, restraining myself from saying that I already have a great coffee maker, the one they've all been using all week. Or to remind me that the cost of their shared gift was probably less than 1/10 of what I spent on them. But I said nothing, telling myself that the main thing is not money, but attention. That evening, while everyone was relaxing in the living room, I found myself cleaning the kitchen all alone again. The sink was littered with dirty dishes, the countertops were covered with sticky stains from gravy and dessert, crumbs were scattered all over the floor. I spent almost an hour trying to get the kitchen in order when Rachel came in carrying an empty glass. "It's a terrible mess," she muttered, glancing around the kitchen. I looked at her, hoping that she would take this as a hint and offer to help. "Yes," I answered shortly, wiping the countertop. But instead of picking up at least one plate, she just filled a glass with wine and said, "Mom asks if there's any chocolate cake left from yesterday." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and turned to her. "Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "could you help me with the dishes? There's a lot of it, and I've been cleaning up after everyone all week." She was genuinely surprised, raising her eyebrows. "Really?" she drawled. "Megan, I'm on vacation. The kids are finally settled, and we're watching a movie." I clenched my jaw. "I'm on vacation too," I reminded him. Or at least it should have been. But instead, I work, clean, and pay for everything. She rolled her eyes like I'd just said something outrageous. "This is your house," she said. "You can't expect the guests to clean up." "I can expect the family to participate," I objected. "Especially when they invited themselves." Rachel's face hardened. "I'm going to get my mom," she called over her shoulder and left the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with my mom, and both of them looked indignant, as if I had done something egregious. "Megan," Mom began in the tone she usually used when she lectured us as kids. "We're all here to spend time together, not to clean up. You can't expect anyone to do this while on vacation." If I don't want to have guests, I shouldn't have invited them, right? I finished for her, knowing this argument perfectly well. Mom nodded. Exactly, dear. New Year's Eve had arrived, and I was mentally marking the days, already counting down the hours to the moment when they would finally leave, when I would be quiet again, when I could return to normal life. But at dinner, Dad suddenly announced, "We're so happy here that we've decided to extend our vacation." We all agreed to take a couple more weeks. I froze with a fork in my hand. What? I asked, hoping I'd misheard. We're staying for 2 more weeks. Mom repeated, smiling as if this was great news. But I felt panic rising inside me. This is not what we planned. I have a job, I have deadlines, I need to. Oh, come on, Megan, Mom waved her off. You work for yourself, you can move the deadlines. Aren't you glad that your family is around longer? I looked at her, then at the others, and it seemed to me that they really sincerely did not understand why I was not jumping for joy. My job is not just a fun hobby, Mom, I said softly. Well, of course, but in the end, family is more important than making phone games, right? My hands clenched into fists under the table. I knew that they would not leave. I knew that the days of chaos, endless waste, and cleaning were waiting for me again. But the worst thing was that, like last time, they did not even realize what a burden they were putting on my shoulders. The 2 extra weeks my family spent were pure hell. The house, which was once a safe haven for me, a place of solitude and tranquility, has become a constant source of chaos and irritation. Mom, not considering it necessary to cook something on her own at least once, continued to demand money for food, insisting that since they were on vacation, they deserved good food, and, of course, this meant orders from expensive restaurants and endless trips to grocery stores, where she chose the most exquisite delicacies, not paying attention. Pay attention to the cost. Dad seemed to have forgotten that he was in my house and not at the hotel, because his day consisted of skiing, returning only for dinner and going to the bedroom immediately after the meal, where he passed out until the morning. Dave and Rachel spent most of their time preoccupied with each other and their plans, completely ignoring the fact that their children were endlessly running around the house, screaming, throwing toys, and causing small disasters that made my hands shake. I tried to explain that I needed quiet time to work, that my career required concentration, but they treated my words with the same condescension as listening to a child who complains that he does not want to go to school. For them, my work remained something optional that could be sacrificed for the sake of real things, family games, camping trips, meaningless conversations that I didn't even try to support. On a particularly stressful day, my boss, Jack, called me directly, which in itself was a worrying sign. "Megan, is everything okay?" "What is it?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "You don't respond to emails, and the client starts worrying about deadlines." I looked around, looking for at least some corner where I could talk without noise and unnecessary ears, but the only available place was the bathroom. I locked the door, leaned against the wall, and squeezed the bridge of my nose hard. "I'm sorry, Jack, I have family matters here. I understand that there are unforeseen situations, but this project requires attention. Can you get back to work by Friday?" I closed my eyes, realizing that this meant sleepless nights, endless edits, working in silence only when everyone finally calmed down. "Yes, of course," I promised, knowing I had no choice anyway. I frantically rushed to work that evening, locking myself in my office, finally immersed in the code, in the very environment in which I felt confident, but 10 minutes later the door, which I foolishly did not lock, quietly opened. I turned around and saw Tommy, who had already reached out to my mouse. "Can we play a game?" "What is it?" he asked, looking at the screen with genuine curiosity. "No," I said sharply, jumping up from my chair and quickly closing my laptop. "This is my work computer. It has important files on it." "But we're bored," Emma folded her arms, clearly unhappy with the rejection. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. Where are your parents? Mom told us to find something quiet to do, Tommy replied calmly. Great, here's a quiet lesson for you. Go and tell her that you need to be looked after. They reluctantly left, closing the door behind them, but 15 minutes later Rachel was already knocking on the door. I opened the door and saw her with both children, arms crossed, face annoyed. You yelled at them, she said, not even trying to soften the accusation. I didn't scream, I replied wearily. I just told them that they can't play on my work computer. All my projects are on it, and if they accidentally delete something or download a virus, I will lose weeks of work. Rachel rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. They just wanted to play. Could you arrange a game for them in the living room? Or take them outside? Or, I don't know, should I look after them myself instead of sending them to me while I'm working? Her face tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. You know, Megan, that's why you're alone. You have no idea what it's like to be a parent. We can't just lock ourselves in a room when things get uncomfortable. I gritted my teeth, feeling anger rise in my throat. No, but you can just dump your kids on someone else and call it a vacation, right? Rachel's mouth opened, but she couldn't find anything to say. Well, she muttered, then turned and walked away, taking the children with her. I knew that I would have to pay for this comment later. I knew that she would not forget or forgive so easily, but at that moment I didn't give a damn. And, of course, at dinner that evening, she apparently shared our conversation with everyone. Mom sat with a stony face, my father pretended not to hear anything, and Dave cast sidelong glances at me, as if I had done something outrageous. When I finally couldn't stand it anymore and asked what was the matter, Mom sighed and said, We just don't understand why it's so difficult for you to be happy that you're not alone during the holidays. Isn't it wonderful to have a family around? I didn't answer because I knew that my answer wouldn't change their minds. But deep down, I realized that next time it would be different. There was an unusual silence at the table, in which there was something tense, foreshadowing an unpleasant conversation. I looked down at my plate, intending to finish a piece of the remaining pie, but Mom, as I expected, broke the silence. Megan, Rachel told us what you said to her today. Her voice was calm, but with that note of disappointment that I remembered from childhood. I think you should apologize to her. She works very hard as a mother, and you say she doesn't do her job. I jerked my head up, unable to believe that this was even being discussed seriously. That's not what I said, I interrupted her before she could continue. I said she shouldn't expect me to look after her kids while I'm working. Rachel sighed and shook her head, as if I was a stupid kid who just didn't understand anything. You have no idea how exhausting it is to be a parent, she said with a touch of arrogance. You don't even know what it means to have real responsibilities. You have no one but yourself, you don't have to take care of anyone. I slowly looked around the table, feeling my irritation rise. No responsibilities? I snorted, looking her straight in the eye. I am responsible for this house, for my career, and, it seems, also for feeding and housing all of you for a whole month, without any help or even a simple admission that this is not my responsibility. Rachel rolled her eyes, folded her arms across her chest, and sneered. Oh, there's that poor me routine again, she made quotation marks in the air. You're just angry because you're alone. I gritted my teeth, but my gaze shifted to my parents. They looked awkward, Mom averted her eyes, and Dad pretended to be too absorbed in his plate. No one even thought to protect me. I closed my eyes and balled my fingers into a fist under the table for a moment before exhaling slowly and getting up from my chair. You're right, my voice was calm, almost even, but everything inside me was boiling. I do not know what it is like to be a parent. But you don't know what it's like when your house is invaded for a month, when you're expected to pay for everything, clean up after everyone, and your job is considered a trifle. I dropped my napkin on the table and turned around. I'm going to work. There are leftovers in the fridge if anyone is still hungry. Without waiting for an answer, I left the dining room, leaving them sitting in silence, and went to my office. I spent the rest of the evening immersed in my work, ignoring the noise of the TV, the occasional burst of laughter, and the muffled hum of conversation. Part of me wanted to go out, join them, try to be the cheerful aunt and caring sister they wanted me to be, but the other, more tired and exhausted part was just counting the days until they left, longing for the peace and quiet that I had missed so much in recent weeks. And now, finally, their extended vacation has come to an end. They packed their bags, loaded suitcases into cars, and the children ran around playing in the snow for the last time while the adults said goodbye. I stood on the porch, watching the commotion, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Despite all the chaos, despite the irritation, they were still my family. Mom hugged me one last time, hugging me tightly, but when she pulled away, an expression of displeasure appeared on her face. "That was wonderful, Megan," she said. "Although I have to say that you could have been a little more welcoming." I blinked in disbelief. "What?" "We're all a little disappointed with the way you've been acting," she continued with a touch of reproach. I pulled back, stunned. "Disappointed?" "Well, yes," she shrugged, as if it were obvious. "You complained about cleaning all the time, didn't want to spend time with the children, behaved as if we were a burden to you. The family, Megan, supports each other." I opened my mouth, ready to protest, but then I closed it. There's no point. They'll never understand. "Have a nice trip home," I said instead, stepping back. "They're gone." I didn't wave after them. I just went inside, closed the door, and leaned back against it. The house was so quiet that I could hear the kitchen clock ticking in the distance. Life without family dramas was pretty sweet. My work was thriving. I finally found the peace I've longed for. A few months later, I was offered a significant, deserved promotion, and I accepted it without hesitation. But then, 2 months before Christmas, my social media notifications started exploding. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the app by scrolling down. It was Rachel. She posted photos of children on skis, smiling against the background of snow-covered slopes. "We're getting ready for our annual Christmas ski trip to Aunt Megan's." I felt the blood drain from my face. The year has not even ended yet, and they have already decided that they will come again. I felt my heart constrict with anger as I scrolled through the comments under Rachel's post. It turns out that not only my closest relatives had already planned their annual invasion, but other family members, whom I hadn't even thought about, began to leave enthusiastic comments. "I can't wait to join you all this year. Leave a place for us, we're in business too. The best Christmas tradition." I gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I was literally shaking. Without hesitation, I dialed my mom's number. "Mom, we need to talk about Christmas," I said as soon as she answered. "Oh, Megan, I was just going to call you." There was genuine delight in her voice. "I have such exciting news. Everyone had such a great time at your place last year that I mentioned it at your cousin Jen's wedding, and now the whole family wants to come." I felt something boiling inside of me. "What family?" I managed to say. "Well, not just us, but Uncle Steve and Aunt Laura, their children, Grandma Betty, your cousins on your father's side." Her voice filled with excitement. "In total, about 20 people. Isn't that wonderful?" I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, the phone rang briefly. She hung up the phone. I remained sitting, staring at the phone screen, feeling the rage slowly building up inside me, thick, heavy, overshadowing my mind. They didn't even ask. They just decided for me. Without hesitation, I opened social media, typed in a text and, without giving myself time to doubt, clicked publish. Announcement: I will not host family members this Christmas. I repeat, I don't invite anyone to my place for the holidays. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk, hoping to clear my head, but when I came back and looked at the notifications anyway, I was stunned. Instead of angry messages and attempts to reason with me, there were comments with laughing emoticons under the post. Huh, well done, Meg. Classics, Meg, and humor. See you in December. They thought I was joking. At that moment, I realized that if they couldn't hear my words, they would have to learn from my actions. I really wasn't going to host them this year. I went to the supermarket and bought food and wine for exactly one person, me. No stocks, no extra portions, no cereals, no snacks that could be divided. Just what I need. Then I called the security company and ordered surveillance cameras around the perimeter of the house. Next time, if someone tries to show up uninvited, I'll have proof. I also decided to warn the neighbors, explaining that I might have uninvited guests and that in case of noise or disorder, they might not hesitate to call the police. And I waited. Exactly 1 week before Christmas, a line of cars appeared in the driveway. I watched through the cameras as 20 people, including parents, siblings, their children, and distant relatives I barely knew, poured out into the snow with suitcases, skis, and holiday packages. The first doorbell rings. I didn't answer. The knocking is louder. I'm silent. My phone vibrated. Father. Megan, we're all here. Open it. I took a deep breath and answered slowly, calmly. No. What do you mean, no? It means that I've told you several times that I'm not hosting Christmas. You chose not to listen. Megan, this is stupid. We've already arrived. The kids are outside. Open the door. I hung up the phone and turned off the sound. Through the cameras, I watched my family huddle together, wrapped in scarves, wincing from the cold. Mom was waving her arms, clearly cursing loudly at my behavior. Rachel tried to calm the crying children. Dave pounded on the door, and the doorbell rang continuously for 20 minutes. But then I saw something that made me immediately grab my phone. Children made snowballs. And they threw them at my windows. I dialed Rachel's number. Tell your kids to stop throwing things at my house. Right now. She got angry. They're just playing. If you'd let us in. I have cameras. They write everything down. If they break the window, I'll report the damage to the property to the police. I hung up the phone. The adults quickly stopped the children, who were already swinging, preparing to launch another batch of snowballs at my windows, but it seemed that this only added fuel to the fire. The screams became louder, accusations flew into the air, and my whole family turned into an angry swarm of bees who could not believe that their plans had collapsed so unexpectedly. Through the cameras, I saw my neighbors start to go outside, attracted by the noise. Soon, Mr. Peterson, an elderly but burly man who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, approached the group of my angry relatives. He crossed his arms over his chest and began talking firmly and slowly to my family, completely unimpressed by their outraged cries. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Megan, your family says you locked them out. Everything is fine. Mr. Peterson's voice was restrained, but there was clearly a note of concern in it. Yes, Mr. Peterson, it's okay, I exhaled, leaning against the wall. I told them several times that I wasn't hosting Christmas, but they came anyway. I won't let them in. I see, he replied slowly. But they create a real mess. If they don't calm down or leave soon, I'm afraid I'll have to call the police. I nodded, knowing he couldn't see it, and said softly, Thanks for letting me know, Mr. Peterson. When I hung up, I turned up the volume on the security system and heard my neighbor clearly and confidently repeating to my family everything I had just said. This is private property, he explained, brooking no argument. If Megan doesn't want you in, that's her right. You are disturbing the order in the area. I suggest you all find another place before the police get involved." The disbelief on my family's faces was almost comical. They never thought that their plan could fail so completely. After a heated discussion that included hand-waving, disappointed sighs, and sidelong glances at my house, they finally started packing back into their cars. The consequences were swift and dramatic. The next day, Rachel posted a long, tearful video on social media about how I abandoned my family for Christmas and left the kids out in the cold. "We tried so hard to keep the family traditions alive, but Megan..." Her voice was trembling. "She just slammed the door in front of us. The children were crying, we were cold. We were hoping to spend time together, but..." My social media exploded with angry comments. "How could you do this to your own family? Christmas is a time for family, not for selfishness. It's a pity that you've become so cold, Meg." Some messages even came from old school friends who had heard the story and decided to leave their opinions. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't try to defend myself, I didn't try to explain, I didn't get into arguments. They've never bothered to listen to me before. So why should they start now? Instead, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I invited some close friends to Christmas dinner. We cooked together, laughed, exchanged modest gifts, played board games, and enjoyed the coziness. Not once during the whole evening did anyone mention my family drama. It was the most peaceful and enjoyable Christmas I've had in years. In the months that followed, my phone was silent. Mom didn't call for my birthday. No messages from Dave and Rachel about what their children are doing. No invitations to family gatherings. I was officially a black sheep. An abusive daughter who turned her back on her family. And, honestly, that was exactly what I wanted. Maybe someday they'll realize how they've been using me all these years. Maybe they realize that a real family respects boundaries and doesn't turn one family member into a free hotel. Perhaps one day they will admit that their behavior was selfish and unfair. But even if that day never comes, that was fine with me. I finally stood up for myself. And it was worth more than any family approval. My house was mine again. My time was mine again. My life was mine again.